Welcome, Senator Antic. It's great to have you on, Bernardi.
Corey, thanks for having me. I'm not sure who your guest was, but it sounds like a booby prize nonetheless. I'm here and we're ready to go.
The viewers are the winner, Alex. Now, let me tell you, the first guest in the studio, we've got a brand new studio here. It's still under construction, but, you know, there's a lot going on and it's delighted. I'm pleased that you're the number one on the ticket. Now, I'm going to get into this. Lloyd asks, and this is a topical question, is nuclear power really expensive?
Well, that's a great question from Lloyd. Look, the answer to that is it kind of doesn't matter at the moment. My view on this is that we've got this prohibition on nuclear power generation in the Environment Biodiversity Conservation Act. That is the issue. Once that's removed, we can let the market work this out. All people who take that view would agree, I'm sure, but the issue is that what we actually have is an opportunity cost with nuclear power. I mean, Canada, for example, have had a nuclear industry since the 60s. Something like a $15 billion a year enterprise now. These things are always capital intensive to build. So I think a lot of the green left love to use that as a kind of a handbrake on nuclear power. Well, it's too expensive to set up $250 million per plant. Once they're up and running, they're dirt cheap. And the flip side to this is the argument that renewables somehow are a cheap, free power source is a nonsense. We know what they're like. Without subsidies, without the rent seekers that run on these and the crony capitalists that get the government handouts, this is incredibly expensive power. And we see that in Germany right now, which in the last 12 months, I think, has raised their power prices 52%.
Well, that's happening here, mate. So we know that's happening here. Okay, but I'm not going to let you get away with this, because the people at home want to know, why didn't the Liberal Party, the Coalition Party, do something about this for the last 10 years? They were cowardly to tackle this.
Well, look, it is true. We had an opportunity. I think actually Liberal governments, both state and federal, had this opportunity. Remember the 2016 scarce Royal Commission.
When the Marshmallow decided not to back the Labor government in.
Well, yeah, indeed there was that moment. And the 2016 scarce Royal Commission, Corey, thank you, was really the moment where this was an opportunity. And it wasn't just nuclear power generation. It was about digging it up, using it for nuclear power and then storing it as well. There's this massive, that $15 billion a year industry I was talking about in Canada would be dwarfed by that industry here. The numbers that were coming out of the scarce Royal Commission were huge. So, look, I think at the end of the day, what should happen is that provision should be repealed. Let's see if the market tells us it's too expensive, so be it.
I had a study done, before we move on, I had a study done by MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, about nuclear power in South Australia. They said a byproduct of this could be that we would have a desalination plant that could, basically greenify at high value crops to a whole swathe of areas on the Eyre Peninsula. It could be a game changer for this state, for the whole country, and yet no one seems to want to take it on except when they're in opposition.
No, that's right.
I'm going to move on. Okay, Chad asks, should the current immigration level be lower? That's a good question.
Yeah, it's a good question. Let's start with the disclaimer that we must make before we upset anyone, Corey. Immigration's been good to this country. It's been very good to this country.
Good,
thank you. I got past it. It's been good to the Bernardi family. It's been good to the Antic family. We get that. So let's get that guff out of the way. The reality, I think, of this is that there must be limits. There are always limits on immigration. And as good as it has been, we sit in the greatest city in this state here in Adelaide, in this country, I should say, where we don't have traffic backed up to, Victor Harbour in terms of getting home. That's not the case in Western Sydney. Mass-scale immigration has the tendency to be a bit of a Ponzi scheme, I think. So, look, numbers-wise, I'm not going to pluck a rabbit out of the hat, but ultimately this has got to be about Australia first. So if we're going to continue with high level of immigration, it's got to be skilled immigration. It's got to be people that bring capital to this state. There was a great opportunity, I think, and some of it was used by the previous government to bring people from Hong Kong who might have, high net worth, these sorts of things. But this sort of mass immigration for the sake of immigration, I think, has probably run its race.
It's got to be in our economic, our cultural and our social interests. And I say that because we have a wonderful country here. We want to preserve it. We want to make sure the quality of life goes up for people and that per capita income is going up for people as well. And that's where I think it's been missing over the last couple of decades. It's been propping up an economy by saying GDP, gross domestic product, is going up. But the rest of us feel like we're going backwards.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right about the cultural stuff as well. You've got to be on Team Australia. We did that. My own dad, of course, was from the former Yugoslavia. He came here and tried to be more Aussie than any Aussie ever could be. Did a great job at it, football at Nord Oval and that sort of stuff. And, it's commendable. And I think as long as people are here to be on the team, we welcome them.
I think a lot of people think that. Okay, someone named Piecemeal on Twitter, I love these Twitter handles. Piecemeal says, which members of state and federal parliament have connections to the World Economic Forum? Now, I know you've been in this space a little bit. You want people to disclose. Name them. Name names.
Well, look, I mean, this is the question. Who are they? And let's be clear, once again, get that disclaimer out. We're not saying it's a bad thing. I mean, there may be good things, there may be bad things. I think there's a lot of alarming language coming out of the World Economic Forum and the leaders. You will own nothing and be happy. It doesn't sound particularly appetising. Amongst others, this sort of stuff we're getting. But the reality is that I think we need to know. And so I'm running a petition at the moment, and people can find it on my website, www.alexantic.com.au, and that can be found there. And what I think needs to happen is that there needs to be an addition to the register of interests here in our Parliament, both in the lower and the upper house. And of course, you remember this from going through the exercise of having to disclose where your cat sat on the mantelpiece at home, mortgage documents, shareholdings, trusts. Well, why don't we need to know who you're dealing with on a global scale? And it's not just the World Economic Forum, it's also NGOs. I want to know, if I'm a voter, which I am, who's dealing with who? Are you an office bearer of the Gates Foundation? Have you been in the last 10 years? These sorts of details really matter, because we're not saying there's anything wrong with it, but I want to know who people are getting their information from.
It would help with the clarity of public advocacy, that if someone is coming out there and saying we should be pursuing, for example, the Great Reset agenda, they never admit that openly, and they've been an acolyte of the World Economic Forum, for example, then it puts it in perspective. And we've got a couple of punters. I mean, Sarah Hanson-Young's one of the young leaders there. Andrew Bragg, I think he's one of your mob as well. Greg Hunt, of course, had it on his website that he was picked through it. Who else is part of the gang?
Well, I don't know, but there's lots of prospective politicians as well that are on there, that people that might be looked at. And we know the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab said publicly that we penetrate the cabinet. So, that's not to suggest there's more to it than that. But this language that's coming out of the World Economic Forum, I find very troubling. And I think politicians should be disclosing that information, and that's why I want to see it happen.
Okay, another person who's in touch with me all the time is Annika. She asks, what do you make of the Bilderberg 2022 meeting, another clandestine meeting of global elites? Yeah. Now, this is even more secretive than the Davos one. What is this Bilderberg mob?
It's incredible that we're talking. This couple of years ago, Corey, we wouldn't even be talking about the mainstream media didn't even really acknowledge this group a little while ago. Now we're hearing about it all the time. It's a group set up in 1954 by, I think, a Dutch royal family member to gather these elites. So we're talking about these days, members of Parliament, senators from the US, usually Democrat senators, big tech representatives, big pharma representatives, military company representatives, and politicians. Hard to see why anyone's worried. Hard to see why anyone's worried about that.
Nothing to see.
Nothing to see here. And they meet. They meet once a year, I think. In this case, they're meeting in Washington right at the moment, or just past. And they meet on the basis that they don't actually represent those institutions. They meet on a personal basis, which is almost like meeting in international waters. We don't know what goes on there. Nobody seems to know that, and nobody talks. Chatham House rules.
Gee, we're going to have to get some Sky News undercover people, maybe send you along.
I reckon I can get in.
Yeah, I reckon you can too. Alex Antic, I'm out of time, but I've got to say thank you for joining me on the desk. It's been a wonderful conversation. I'm sure you at home have enjoyed it too, because this man is doing really, really good work in the Parliament, and we need him there for a very long time.